Tonight, twin attacks with 2 shooters killing at least 30 people in 24 hours.
AK, somebody's got shot.
In El Paso, a massacre at a shopping mall leaves more than 20 people dead. Hours later, another shooting, this time in Dayton, Ohio, where at least 9 more people were killed. Now the president is condemning the violence.
America weeps for the fallen.
This as the nation grieves. With vigils and prayers for the victims in both cities. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation. Two shootings, more than 30 people dead, and tonight questions about who is to blame. Welcome to Faith Nation. I'm Jenna Browder. Tonight, the president is calling on the nation to come together in the face of this weekend's violence.
America weeps for the fallen. We are a loving nation, and our children are entitled to grow up in a just, peaceful, and loving society. Together, we lock arms to shoulder the grief. We ask God in heaven to ease the anguish of those who suffer, and we vow to act with urgent resolve.
And in addition to those who died, dozens more were injured. Tonight, both cities, El Paso, Texas, and Dayton, Ohio, are gripped by shock and grief. Here's Amber Strong.
2 communities are in mourning, and the demand for legislative action from Washington is growing after 2 mass shootings in less than 24 hours. In Texas, vigils are taking place on both sides of the border to remember the victims of Saturday's mass shooting in El Paso.
AK, somebody's got shot.
More than 20 people were killed when a gunman began firing on people at a crowded Walmart. The suspect was taken into custody without incident.
He basically didn't hold anything back. Particular questions were asked and he responded.
Investigators say the motive was a hatred of immigrants. And according to a manifesto believed to be posted by the gunman, the goal was to stop a, quote, invasion of Hispanics.
We are treating it as a domestic terrorism case, and we're going to do what we do to terrorists in this country, which is deliver swift and certain justice.
Mirabel Latin was shot while raising money for her child's soccer team.
I had to pretend I was dead, and all I could say is, God, please take care of my children.
Just 13 hours later,
people start running, and that's when I started hearing shots fired.
A second mass shooting, this time at a popular entertainment district in Dayton, Ohio. 9 people were killed, among them the alleged shooter's sister. Police responded immediately, taking out the gunman in less than 1 minute.
Their amazing courage and their response undoubtedly saved many, many, many lives.
Although there is no known motive so far, high school classmates allege the shooter kept a hit list of fellow students. From Dayton to Washington, a search for answers to the nation's gun violence. Presidential candidate and El Paso native Beto O'Rourke lays the blame for Saturday's shooting at the feet of the president.
Anybody who begins their campaign for the presidency by calling Mexican immigrants rapists and criminals, anyone who, as president, describes asylum seekers at the U.S.-Mexico border as an infestation or an invasion or animals, sows the kind of fear, the kind of reaction that we saw in El Paso yesterday.
While the El Paso shooter was supportive of the president's policies, online posts state his views on immigrants predate Trump's presidency.
These are crazy people, sick people, and until we figure out why we're creating this many people like this in this culture, why we're giving them such wide sort of audiences on social media, why we're making weapons available to them when they probably shouldn't get them, those are the conversations to have.
Now, gun control advocates may get their wish. There's a bipartisan call for legislators to return to Washington from their August recess and take action. Amber Strong, CBN News, Washington.
Thank you, Amber. Well, President Trump today condemned the shootings, racist bigotry, and white supremacy. He's calling on lawmakers to seek real bipartisan solutions to the issue. For more on the president's speech and Congress's reaction, we turn to Capitol Hill correspondent Abigail Robertson. Abigail, what does the president say needs to be done?
Well, President Trump says that he believes that the shootings, he's outraged and sickened by not one but two mass shootings over the weekend. And he's calling for lawmakers to unite in seeking bipartisan solutions to make America safer.
We must honor the sacred memory of those we have lost by acting as one people. Open wounds cannot heal if we are divided.
Trump laid out his plan for how to address the issue.
The shooter in El Paso posted a manifesto online consumed by racist hate,
calling on social media and government authorities to do a better job in identifying early warning signs and acting against potential mass shooters before they strike.
We must reform our mental health laws to better identify mentally disturbed individuals who may commit acts of violence.
Trump wants to make sure those judged to pose grave risks to public safety do not have access to firearms through red flag laws.
Now is the time to set destructive partisanship aside, so destructive, and find the courage to answer hatred with unity, devotion, and love.
On the campaign trail, Ohio Senator Sherrod Brown says the Senate should go back to Washington.
We wake up to grief and sadness about these victims and these families, but it pretty quickly turns to anger that our government hasn't done anything.
Joining Democrat leadership in demands for a vote on a background check bill already passed by the House.
We know what to do. We know that background checks worked. We know that a ban on assault weapons worked. It was bipartisan. It expired, and we haven't renewed it.
Others also want Washington to take action.
We've had great sadness over the last many hours, but now it's really turning to anger. Anger about the lack of movement on gun control.
President Trump suggested a possible immigration reform bill combined with legislation for strong background checks, a move that angered Democrats who criticized Trump for even suggesting they connect gun control to one of the most polarizing issues in America. Back to you, Jenna.
All right, thank you, Abigail. Well, today, CBN News spoke with the acting commissioner of Customs and Border Patrol. In our exclusive interview with Mark Morgan, CBN's chief political analyst David Brody asked him about the president's plan to try and pair gun control legislation with immigration reform.
Again, I think the point there is that we need legislative fixes on the immigration. So I think we should be getting together in a bipartisan way to take a look at every option, right? If I don't care where the connection is or where the tie is.
Couple it together if you have to.
That's right. Let's do what we need to do to fix this.
And David also asked him if he thought the president's rhetoric had any bearing on this weekend's violence.
Let's make no mistake. This was done by an individual who was sick, who was evil. He is the one responsible for the murder of those individuals and nobody else. Mm-hmm. But I'm convinced, and I know that the city of El Paso is resilient, and they'll bounce back.
How concerned are you about some of the rhetoric?
I think rhetoric is in one category, and then the acts of this individual, this depraved coward, is in another category. I think to cross that boundary of rhetoric to what this individual did, murdering innocent people, the coward that he is, those are two different things.
And with that, we want to bring in our political panel. We have David with us and Rick Klein, ABC's political director. Both of you, thank you for joining us. And David, great interview.
Thanks, appreciate it.
You know, this question, this first one for both of you, do you agree with Commissioner Morgan? Is he right that President Trump bears some responsibility for this weekend's shootings? Rick, you first.
I don't think he was assigning responsibility to the president, but I think we've seen people even up through the FBI saying that there's a connection between political rhetoric and bad actions, and there's definitely a growing concern around that. And I think you've seen a number of Democrats who are going to say, look, you can draw a straight line from the president's remarks up through the shooting. I don't think it's that simple. But I do think it's a moment to take pause and take stock of where we've come and the overheated rhetoric that I think the president himself was referring to today.
And that rhetoric was not on display. What I mean by on display, he didn't take any responsibility at all for that in his statement today. I don't think anybody was expecting him to take any responsibility, but he didn't even go there. And so obviously he went to some other issues, including violent video games, which now there's this big controversy whether or not that leads to mass shootings. I think people agree that it leads to violence. So a lot of interesting things to pile through.
David, the president has also called for the death penalty for people who people convicted of hate crimes like this. That's pretty strong.
I thought it was very strong, actually, and honestly, I thought it was probably the best part. When I say the best part, the strongest part for sure of what he said today. I mean, actions speak louder than words. Well, here you go, at least in a proposal of some sort of legislation that DOJ might try to pass or try to move forward. Look, it's interesting. If you look at the death penalty, what he said about the death penalty a different way, he basically said if you're a white supremacist and you're convicted of a hate crime, you're going, he wants to see the death penalty. You can make a headline out of that to say, Donald Trump calls for the death penalty for white supremacists. That's a good headline for the White House today. I know that's a bit there's some spin in there, but there's something to be said about it, too.
Yeah, shifting gears here just a little bit, Rick, over the weekend we saw a lot of the Democratic presidential candidates on the different networks talking about these shootings, what they would do with their gun control plans. How much of an issue is this going to be in 2020?
Well, I think it's a limited issue in the Democratic primary only because the candidates largely agree. There aren't really stark divisions in terms of what they do going forward. And in terms of what it means in 2020, we have started to see the politics around gun control shift. For years, it was just an article of faith that people that wanted further gun controls didn't vote on that issue. There were some signs, though, that started to change in the 2018 midterms. And if that becomes a voting issue in 2020, that's a constituency the president has to be worried about. And I think in part what's speaking politically to that group today is that there's a large number of Americans that supports an assault weapons ban, supports universal background checks. Whether that makes a difference or not, that's the fact of the polling. The politics hasn't really led the way on that so far.
Do you think we'll hear them talk about other aspects of this whole debate, whether it's the culture or mental illness, that kind of thing?
No question. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of them went from guns to rhetoric and words and the power of words to inspire bad people. And I do think that the questions around access and mental illness are very important ones.
This feels also a little bit like the gay marriage situation, like that trains leaving the station. It feels a little bit like that, especially with not just millennials, but the Gen Z crowd. They grew up in all of this. Buttigieg kind of talked a little bit about that on the debate stage the other night. I think it feels like the train is moving pretty quickly on this.
Just a few seconds left here, but Joe Biden referred to the shootings this weekend in Houston and Michigan. We've seen quite a few slip-ups from him lately. Rick, is this becoming a problem for the former vice president?
I think as a one-off, I think the president today got the wrong Ohio city as well, and you're seeing little errors along the way. He seemed to correct himself pretty quickly on that, but after that first debate in particular, he's got to be careful about the perceptions around that.
All right, Rick Klein, David Brody, both of you, thank you.
Thanks.
Well, when we come back, a former special intelligence officer breaks down the threat of domestic terrorism.
Introducing the CBN Bible from CBN.com. Now, an easier way to study the Bible and grow in your faith. Highlight your favorite verse. Read separate versions at a glance. Click and read a commentary. Or cross-reference your favorite verse using the Strong's Concordance. All the right tools to study the Bible, all in one place. The CBN Bible, available at cbn.com/Bible or the iTunes App Store.
It has the power to influence weight loss, boost your immune system, and improve brain function.
We've seen an explosion of data on the role of the gut microbiome in health.
The free Build a Better Gut booklet reveals the latest information about the gut microbiome. You'll discover how your gut affects the rest of your health.
The gut microbiome has been linked to depression and cancer and heart disease.
Learn how to build a stronger, healthier gut.
The microbiome, if it's in good composition, are really protecting us all the time from more invasive things.
Get the Build a Better Gut booklet, free from the Christian Broadcasting Network. Call 1-800-700-7000 or go to cbn.com/buildabettergut.
You need to make sure that your microbes are working with you, not against you.
And if you order online, you'll get immediate access to the Build a Better Gut series, a digital copy of the booklet, and related bonus material. Build a Better Gut today. Call 1-800-700-7000 or go to cbn.com/buildabettergut for your free copy.
Here, we're committed to a heritage of rigorous scholarship dating back over 1,000 years.
And to a faith tradition dating back 1,000 more.
This is how we create a culture of inquiry where no topic is off limits.
And a culture of hope.
Anything's possible!
It's Christian leadership.
And it's changing the world for the better.
It's higher learning.
It's greater knowing.
It's what makes us whole.
It's what makes us Regent.
Welcome back. Well, joining us now is Tim Larkin, a security consultant and former Special Warfare Intelligence Officer. Tim, good to have you. Thanks for joining us. The shooter in El Paso posted a 230-word screed to a website called 8chan. Other gunmen have also posted documents here before carrying through their own mass murders. Law enforcement now investigating the El Paso attack as a domestic terror incident. Tim, is this something we're seeing more of?
The real issue is the isolation. What you're finding is mentally disturbed people for the most part. They're isolated from society. They find a calling. They get radicalized.
Explain the difference between domestic terrorism and homegrown violent extremism, Tim.
What kind of recruiting works, or how does somebody get radicalized? We call it radicalized. We use a lot of the current terminology. But basically, anybody who isolates themselves and then, focuses and goes down rabbit holes of racism. It can be racism, it can be religious, it can be political. They'll go down these rabbit holes and they'll just go to the far extreme, and they get to the point to where they think by actually going out there and viewing themselves as leading the charge, basically, for the big change, whatever it is. It could be, religious fervor. It could be, there's too much. There's too many immigrants coming in, and you're going to lead the charge. You've had enough, and this is how you're going to do it. They literally can work themselves into this frenzy where it seems logical.
Are there similarities between domestic terrorism and the classic terrorism we know from groups like Al-Qaeda?
Sometimes it can be white nationalism. Sometimes it can be a patriot approach. It's this idea of protecting the country, cleansing the country of unwanted individuals who are ruining our country. I mean, the doctrine is all over when you read some of the manifestos that are put out. One is the idea of protecting the homeland is probably the reason for most domestic terrorism that you'll see, racism, cleansing the population of unwanted. Whereas overseas recruitment terrorism, domestic terrorism usually has some sort of a political or religious start to it.
And Tim, is there a centralized figure within these groups who perpetuates this kind of propaganda?
This thing is just a Medusa. It has tons of different heads. It's very decentralized. These cells pop up. So the internet basically provides an opportunity to put out jihadist material, recruitment material, ad nauseum. Every time you try to shut one down, another one will show up, and they all use it. So there are groups like that will help out produce a lot of propaganda, but it's not as easy as just shutting them down. We always look for the one source that if we just do this, it'll all go away, and it's not. It's a many-headed monster. It's not people that we're fighting. We're fighting an idea, an ideology.
Still ahead, finding bipartisan ground on gun control. Is it possible? Stay with us.
Life. It's meant to be lived fully. Jesus said it. I came to give you life. Life to the fullest. Life in your family. Life in your finances. Life in your body, mind, and spirit. Life in your everyday. At CBN.com, we're taking what Jesus said seriously. We're here to help you discover life. Life. Live it fully. CBN.com. Want to be a part of a community that inspires your spiritual growth while winning prizes? The all-new MyCBN app. Connect with the community for prayer and encouragement. Track and set spiritual goals. Enjoy conversation starters with friends and family. And collect points to win prizes. The all-new MyCBN app. A great place to belong. Download the app at cbn.com/mobile. Grow, connect, have fun. The all-new MyCBN app.
Watch breaking news, in-depth exclusive stories and programs, from health to entertainment, you won't find anywhere else. The CBN News Channel, a perspective you can trust. Enjoy credible news reporting from around the world. Discover inspiring programs and stories of hope, all in one place, from a Christian perspective. The CBN News Channel, a perspective you can trust. Check your local listings or visit cbnnewschannel.com.
Come home to the sounds of Southern Gospel from CBN Radio. You'll enjoy a rich Southern blend of bluegrass, classic gospel, and Southern gospel favorites like the Gaithers, the Crab Family, and bluegrass sounds like Mountain Faith. So make yourself at home with the all-new CBN Southern Gospel, now available at cbnradio.com.
Well, Kristen Brown is a gun control advocate with the Brady campaign to prevent gun violence, and she joins us now. Kristen, good to have you. Thanks for being here.
Good to be here.
With stricter gun control laws, a lot of people are asking, would they have prevented this weekend's shootings?
Well, in America today, we have an epidemic of gun violence. We have 40,000 Americans every year in this country shot and killed by guns, 80,000 more injured. We've lost more Americans to gun violence in this country since 1970 than all America's wars combined, which is a really hard fact to take in. So what that means is there is not going to be any one thing that's going to solve the epidemic. When you look at mass shootings, as horrific as these are, and they are absolutely horrific, they account for about 2% of all gun deaths in America today. The common denominator that we find in shooting after shooting, and El Paso really is no different, unfortunately, than Dayton, is the role of assault-style weapons and high-capacity magazines.
So is that what the Brady campaign is sort of advocating against, then, these kinds of weapons?
We believe that Congress did the right thing when it banned assault weapons for about a decade. We think that it's a problem that that ban was allowed to lapse. We think that a ban should be reinstated, and we think there should be restrictions on high-capacity magazines. The person in Dayton had a 100-round magazine. Nothing good has ever happened from the 11th or 12th or 13th round of a magazine. But as I said, that's addressing about 1% to 2% of gun violence. We also need expanded background checks, and we need extreme risk laws, what the president today referred to as red flag laws.
Kristen, a lot of people are asking, apparently the Walmart in El Paso was a gun-free zone. A lot of people are wondering what would have happened had one of those shoppers also been armed. What's your response to that?
Well, like many Americans, I've been watching the coverage of El Paso. And actually, a lot of the shoppers did have guns. One of them was interviewed, and actually, he was kind of a tactical expert with guns. He didn't use the gun for two reasons, and this is typically the case, regardless of the area where a mass shooting takes place. Number one, he didn't want to be mistaken by as the shooter, which is a real problem. Number two, he didn't want to shoot the wrong person. In these kind of situations, unless you've been there and experienced something that is akin to combat, we can all say, oh, this is what we would have done. That's what we would have done. Talk to police officers, talk to combat veterans about what it's like on the field, and then you'll understand that even trained officers of the law hit the right target less than 50% of the time.
What about other factors in all of the debate? More talk about mental health and issues like that, the culture.
Well, I think that we do have to look at the culture. One of the aspects of the culture that you've been covering that I think all of us as Americans need to understand is words matter and leadership around issues matter. Our culture is too divisive in this country today. And I don't think that the bully pulpit of the presidency should be used to divide. I think it should be used to unite. I would love better options for people who have issues with mental health. I think we need better health care coverage in this country. When it comes to gun violence, though, I would like to note The American public, the American populace, doesn't suffer from a greater degree of mental illness than any other people in any industrialized country in this earth. We have a lot more gun violence because we have a lot more guns.
Well, Kristen Brown, we have to leave it there, but thank you so much. We appreciate your insights.
Thanks for having me.
When we come back, the nation comes together to grieve.
Life. It's meant to be lived fully. Jesus said it. I came to give you life. Life to the fullest. Life in your family. Life in your finances. Life in your body, mind, and spirit. Life in your everyday. At CBN.com, we're taking what Jesus said seriously. We're here to help you discover life. Life. Live it fully. CBN.com.
On October 1st, 1961, history was made when a tiny station began transmitting the first signals of the Christian Broadcasting Network.
CBN, the Christian Broadcasting Network.
And now, a new era has begun with the all-new CBN News Channel.
Just moments ago, the Iron Dome intercepted an incoming rocket right on the Gaza border.
And ministering in this area, spiritual warfare is definitely involved.
A 24/7 news network, bringing you the news you want from a source you can trust.
In Kenya, 40% of the medical services are actually provided by these Christian hospitals.
Let's talk about the economy.
Believers here are joining together to win people to Jesus Christ.
All your favorite shows now in one place. Go to CBNNewsChannel.com to find out how to get the CBN News Channel on your TV all day, every day. CBN News.
Finally tonight, Charleston, South Carolina was the scene of a horrific mass shooting in 2015. 9 people died when a 21-year-old white man began shooting at black church members holding a Bible study. Race was at the core of this attack, but the event, which is aimed at starting a race riot, actually brought the community together.
Our community came together through prayer. A lot of folks say that prayers don't matter. Well, I will disagree with them vehemently. Because of prayer, the 9 family members forgave the shooter and brought unity into our state in a way that we have not seen in the history of the state, frankly. The Civil War started in Charleston, and to have a white racist walk into a door of a black church to start, according to his objective, a race riot, to have the actual opposite occur because of the power of faith in that church and in our community was fantastic and phenomenal.
And 4 years after the power of forgiveness united Charleston, the nation is still coming together and grieving over mass shootings. This weekend, memorials were held in El Paso and Dayton to remember the dead. And that is where we leave you tonight, with those scenes of prayer as survivors stood vigil for the lives lost.